Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to resume. I don't want to take you away from the great table conversation, but I assure you there's going to be more time for that coming up in a little bit. Again, my name is Ryan Kelsey. I'm from the Helmsley Trust. And this session is to allow everyone a chance to hear a little bit about what happened at the sessions that you didn't attend. So we have 4 distinguished panelists here. And what we've asked each of them to do is to share a little bit about what brings them here, if you haven't heard from them before. Talk a little bit about areas of interest that they have, and then quickly transition to teasing out the real highlights of the session that they were so kind and generous with their time to facilitate for us. So I'm just going to get right into it because my job as moderator is to say as little as possible. And we're going to go in topic order, which means we're going to start with Big Dave. So Dave, take it away.
Thank you. I'm Dave Douglas. I'm the Dean of the School of Science and Math at Pasadena City College. And I'm very much interested in helping to redesign our introductory level STEM courses, science courses. And we've had a little bit of experience in this at our college and a little bit of success. And so our conversation today, as we sort of march through our charge, the first thing we thought about was what do we mean by our introductory level courses? And we really saw them as falling into 3 categories. One is the first course in the major sequence for a given STEM field. The second is that general ed course that a lot of students take, the science avoidance course, or the one course they're going to have, the science experience that'll last them the rest of their life, at least until they get into the classroom or something like that. And then the third kind of entry-level STEM course we talked about were courses that were designed for specific populations, and the one that comes first to mind is the pre-teacher, pre-service teacher kinds of STEM courses. And one of the big challenges and opportunities that were based around that was the notion of scale. Some of these courses, these general ed science courses, are massive. 1,000 students a semester typically can go through some of these courses. So that's both an opportunity and a challenge. Our first charge was to look at what are the outcomes we want to get out of these, and it was summarized quite nicely by aligning our outcomes with the outcomes of the Common Core, and those were communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. And then the big elephant in the room was the 5th C, which is what typically our faculty always focus on, and that is content. So we had a nice little discussion about that. We came up with some ideas about notion of just in case versus just in time, and tie that into how we can do some of this deep learning and so on. I'm jumping around here because my notes weren't mailed to me, so I have to go off my pictures of the whiteboard, and I apologize. So we looked at those as our opportunities, and really the notion that we came to was the idea of blending content with those 4 C's, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. And that's where the challenge lies for us, is to blend those things together. So part 2 for us was barriers, and we started to talk a little bit about student expectations. I imagine that came up a little more in the Bridges group. But what we soon went to is barriers for faculty, and that there are a number of barriers for faculty, all the way from the reward and incentive for trying new things, the fear of trying new things in the class, and not being successful in having the administration look down upon that. We also talked about space as a barrier. We tend to have antiquated or classrooms designed for the mid-1950s way in which we used to teach and learn, and we looked for opportunities to break out of those space constraints that we often have in our classrooms. We also talked a little bit about appropriate technology. Too much, too little, how do we use this in a right way to be able to help our students learn what they need to know to be successful in the modern world where e-memory is now becoming very accessible as opposed to O-memory, which is our organic memory. Thirdly, we looked at what are the resources, and we really saw faculty as a great resource for each other, this idea of faculty inquiry groups. We had one group mention team curriculum, and the importance of data to inform what is happening and what is going on within those faculty inquiry groups so we can move forward in a way that is data informed. And another notion that came up is this idea of the integration, the transdisciplinarity of STEM. Once you become a practitioner of STEM, you are often working in an area where you're transitioning across disciplines, and we need to build that more into our curriculum. Last but not least, we tried to think about what resources we had in the room, and we had a very good, lively discussion among ourselves, and we realized there were a lot of great thinkers in the room, and one of the things we came out of there with is the notion that we could work through some of our national organizations, whether we're chemists or geoscientists or engineers, and provide an opportunity to talk about how we redesign these undergraduate intro-level curriculum courses at the national level, both in our discipline areas and outside our discipline areas at more general conferences like things like AAC&U and things like that. So we saw that as a great opportunity, and we were grateful we got through all 4 of our charges.
Well done, Dave. Thank you. What we're going to do is we're going to have each of the panelists speak just along the lines Dave did, and then we'll open it up to you guys to hear more detail and commentary and look for points of connection. So, Sue, would you mind going next?
My name is Sue Wessler. I'm a professor of genetics at UC Riverside. I'm also a Howard Hughes Hhmi professor, which is very different than Hhmi investigator, because the idea of that program is to bring the excitement of the research lab to the undergraduate classroom. And the idea really is that there are many ways to do that. And so among the Hhmi professors, we're just running the gambit of things that we do. My particular project was reinventing my research lab as an undergraduate classroom. And the reason for that really, I think, typifies why this program exists and why our session, which was on freshman early experiences, early authentic research experiences. And I think the reason there's a need for that is because we've gone completely the other way. In fact, many of the UCs, most of them, have given up their research, their laboratories in introductory biology and in other courses. And what's happened is to process all the students or whatever the logic was, to interact with as many students and to deal with the huge pipeline of incoming science majors, the solution, which turned out to be a total disaster, is to have enormous lecture classes where students, literally, it's the funnel and, the knowledge comes pouring in. And none of us, as a scientist, what we love about science is not memorizing facts. We love doing science. And that's really what this comes down to, is this switch in the way we're starting to think about it. And the reason for the need for this is that the persistence of our science majors, the students that come in as science majors, is atrocious. At Riverside, maybe of the people that come in, the students that come in, maybe 30% of them persist as science majors. So we're turning people off to science, and at Riverside, and I know at many of your schools, the majority of our students are underrepresented minorities. And so we're really doing a disservice. The other thing that I've brought up is what this country is known for. I mean, people all over the world still come to this country to work in our research labs. They are still the best in the world. And when I sit next to someone on a plane and I tell them that, usually a somebody with different political persuasion than mine, when I tell them that, they're astounded. They're like, you mean we're still the best at something? I said, yeah, we are the best at research. I said, look at the Nobel Prizes, look at, all of the measures, but what's so, so startling, I've spent my whole life in Research One universities, and it's the disconnect. It's that I call that the upstairs. The upstairs is where all, the high-tech research is going, and it's also where there are very few American students up there. Most of the students, at least in biology, in engineering, and other areas, most of our graduate students and postdocs are from Asia. And for a number of reasons. So, when I sit and teach undergraduates at Riverside, the vast majority of them are underrepresented minorities, and when I teach the graduate students, it's a totally different demographic. And when I saw this, what I wanted to do was to change it, to make it so that our students are the ones that not necessarily become scientists, because there's not a whole lot of future in that, but that but that they appreciate science, they love science. And I think what we have found, and what our group certainly talked about, is the way you engage students in science is to have them do science. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but the barriers to that, I think you all know, one is the cost, one of the facilities. The most important one, as we talked about, is us as faculty members. We don't have time, we can't do this, we can't do that, and there's validity to a lot of that. We have to incentivize teaching. We don't incentivize teaching in our tenure and promotion process. Some of us do. It's probably better at the Cal States than it is at the UCs. But, teaching only counts if you do a crappy job. If you do a great job, it's okay, great. But we have to change that, especially now that research grants are so hard to get, and our assistant professors are miserable because all they're doing is writing grants when they should really be bringing the excitement of their research to the undergraduate classroom. So I think that's really what our goal is, and the obstacles are, numerous, but I think we're heading in the right direction.
Great, thank you very much, Sue. Next, we're going to have Edith. And I think Edith has prepared a few visuals for us, which are above. Are they set? Okay, terrific. Edith, Group 4.
Hi, I'm Edie Quaper from City College of San Francisco. It's a community college housed, in San Francisco. And what we did was we had a program in biotech. And we were looking for ways to actually increase the diversity. So the program itself was founded in 1993. And there had a tremendous success rate at getting students out into science. But the biggest problem that we saw was that we didn't have a lot of diversity. And what happened in 2002 was I was hired to make that diversity occur. And what I was hired to do was the bridge to biosciences, biotech at that point. It is a learning community with 3 interrelated courses. We have BTech 10, which is our laboratory course, which drives the learning community. So when you are doing an experiment within BTech 10, it is the topic for the language class. And you're thinking, well, why do you need a language? Well, have you ever been a non-scientist and sat at a table full of scientists? You know you need a language course to teach them the language of science. In addition, it teaches them how to take notes, and a lot of the soft skills are actually in there. And it's amazing this is 1 semester, within 1 semester, these guys are speaking science. In BTech 108A, it's our math class. And in the math class, we're giving the math to pass chemistry, which actually happens to be simple algebra. A lot of people get tied into it being calculus and all of that, but if you look at the problems of dimensional analysis, it is actually algebra, and it's beginning algebra. So we have targeted this population to be people with 7th to 9th grade levels of math and English. And over the years, we grew the program. We added an internship in their second semester. We have them present at a symposium where they have posters coming back from their internships. We have the ones that are going out to internships present posters on what they want to do. And industry has loved this. They come in droves, as the next slide is going to show. Oops, I skipped. Now, how does this work with their pass rate? Well, if you move on into the next classes that these students take, notice the pass rate within chemistry is at 83% of the students who complete bridge. Now, if we move into inorganic, that pass rate goes up to 96%. These are students with 7th to 9th grade language and math abilities when they started. These would be the students that failed. No, this is the pre-majors level because you want to do, you're stepping them up. If we throw them right into majors, a good portion of them would actually survive. But by stepping them up gradually, they will then transfer to a CSU or a UC, and their success there is phenomenal. Now let's look at the demographics of what these people do. So our African American demographic is at 26.6%. We obviously changed our program. Asian is at 25.2%. I had that one wrong earlier. I apologize for that one. The Hispanic is 16.1%, Caucasian at 23.8%, multiracial at 4.2%, and decline to state at 4.2%. So it's an amazing increase in the demographics of students who are moving forward. Now, we don't do this in a box. We've actually engaged industry. We have 49 industry partners that work with us. And what we found out that they love to do is judge poster presentations, serve as internship providers, and most semesters we have more internships than we have people for the internships. We are turning away internship providers. They serve as judges for student poster presentations, mock interviews, because we're getting people ready to go out into jobs. And the students themselves put together a bio-symposium, which is a science conference where these posters are presented. Last semester, we had 150 people attend. 85 of those were industry. So as I said, industry has very much embraced this. Our team is huge, and it really does take a large team to pull something like this off. As you saw, there were a lot of classes. But our students are what we do it for. And as you can see, the wonderful diversity within our classes, just looking at this, is amazing. And I'd like to thank our funders over the years, the National Science Foundation, through ATE, which actually sent me to this conference, the Bay Area Workforce Collaborative, which has funded the bridge for years, especially the internship portion of it. We started with Perkins funding over 12 years ago, and of course the Department of Labor is trying to mimic this across the country. Now, I ran the session that was on how can we create these bridges and how does this work with outreach? And some of the challenges that we see for these students, and I apologize because my notes didn't make it either, they're in huge, huge form. So, a lot of the problems is just introducing them to what a scientist is. There's not a lot of way to wrap your mind around that when you're out there playing basketball, as one of the people were talking about. It's one of those things where you have to go out there and make this something that they understand, that they want to do. They also need to, one of the things will also work is how do they reach their goal? In these set of 3 classes, we actually empower them with how they have a goal. We have them create their own goals, and we work with them to make these goals. And that was one of the things that was very important as we are putting forward. What resources and what people do I need to overcome the barriers? Well, the resources that my group pointed out was our own students. We need resources such as the interaction with the people that were actually in the room to help with putting together a program like this and finding the successes. And how we could help each other was to actually stay connected electronically with each other. All right, thank you.
Great, thanks, Eva. And the man who doesn't need a name tag, Ramesh, was doing our topic number 5. So Ramesh, how'd it go for you?
Great. Thank you very much, Ryan. And one of the first words that I want to begin with is continuum. Remember that, continuum. We'll come back to that at the end. Because when you talk about connections to career and industry, it's not as if magically these students come into college, graduate with a STEM degree, and they're prepared for a career in industry. It really is a continuum that connects all aspects of our education system, K-12, K to infinity and beyond, if you want to go there. And really getting us as scientists and engineers and educators to wrap our heads around this fact that it takes motivation, it takes retention, it takes persistence to graduation in order to achieve the results that we seek. So let me start with some sobering statistics first, because again, as I say, I'm going to reveal my disciplinary background here as an engineer. So we know that currently the US graduates about 300,000 bachelor's and associate degrees in STEM fields, and fewer than 40% of students who enter college intending to major in a STEM field actually complete a STEM degree. Speaking of engineering, when you look at the engineering degrees granted in the United States, that has stayed pretty much flat over the last 2.5 decades, 70 to 75,000 graduates. But if you peel the onion a little bit and you start looking at what the actual numbers are, you'll find, for example, the percentage of engineering bachelor's degrees awarded to women rose steadily weekly from 0.4%, that's 0.4% in 1966, to a high of 20% in 2002. By 2008, however, that percentage had flipped back to 18.5%. This is from the National Science Foundation. Minority students have fared even worse. From 1997 to 2006, the percentage of historically underrepresented minority students earning engineering bachelor's degrees rose almost imperceptibly from 12% to 12.4%. Again, barely moving the needle. The percentage of African Americans actually declined from 4.9% to 4.7%, while Hispanic Americans grew from 6.6% to 7.2%. Now, these are important numbers for us to keep in mind, because ultimately, whatever initiatives we pilot, whatever initiatives we launch, we need to be able to measure these outcomes. They need to be tangible, they need to be measurable, they need to be quantifiable if we're going to put resources to solve these problems. Now, because of the rich diversity of the student populations, our community colleges across the United States of America are slowly attracting attention as potential reservoirs of the kinds of diverse people and diverse thinking that is needed in a creative, competitive engineering workforce. Did you know that approximately 12% of 17%, 12 to 17% of engineering undergraduate degrees actually go to transfer students who come in from the community colleges? And then you start thinking about diversity, and it takes on a whole different picture. Again, continuum, all the way from elementary to high school, middle school, in between, community colleges, and the university. So our group, on Connection to Career and Industry, tackled what are some of the changes and outcomes that we want to see. So we actually had about 20 people in the room. We split into 2 groups, and they had a very vigorous discussion that was only interrupted by the lunch. To nobody's big surprise, mentorships. We need mentorships, internships, long-term internships. Need to facilitate connections between universities and industry. We need to have nonprofits provide scholarships We need to have sustainable processes, processes by which these employees, these students of today, who are the engineers and the scientists of tomorrow, can hit the ground running. And I'll share a personal example with you here from Cal State Northridge. You had Peggy Nelson speak to you earlier today from Northrop Grumman. And about a year ago, Northrop Grumman came to us and named us a core university partner. So what does it mean? Northrop Grumman has a number of different business sectors, and previously what they were doing is they were going to a university, each of these sectors was going to a university trying to attract the talent they needed in science and engineering. They put their heads together and they said, this doesn't make sense. We need to have an integrated approach that cuts across all of the business sectors at Northrop Grumman. And out of that came the core university program. Now, both new hires as well as people looking to advance their careers, we have a number of students who are earning bachelor's degrees there, many of them going on to earn master's degrees. Later on this evening, at the close of the day, you'll actually hear from one of our graduates who's been through one of our programs here. Now, the core university programs are selected based on a number of factors, whether the university's programs are accredited, the university's reputation, what its STEM outreach program look like. In other words, what are we doing to attract those underserved minorities to our disciplines? What are we doing to promote engineering and computer science? What are we doing to promote science? What are we doing to excite them about our disciplines? We all know the problems. We know that when they get in and they're faced with challenging courses in mathematics, that sometimes they don't see quite the end at the very place that they need to go. So how do we inspire them to persist? Now, we also have faculty that are an integral part of this mix. And faculty members, by redesigning their curriculum, by working with students, by offering these internships, by offering them real-life experiences before they ever set foot into that company, are now able to motivate more students to come into our disciplines. Some of the other thoughts that came up in our discussions today, changes that we wish to see and barriers, is that we need to work back from the university, connecting through each of our partners holistically, not just when a grant opportunity applies, but every single time when we think about education, think about community engagement. And as an engineer, I think about engineering as a very enabling profession. And I believe that if you put that up front as an educator, say, what are we doing to solve transportation? What are we doing to solve energy? What are we doing to solve clean air, healthcare? Whatever the cost might be, you'll find a technical solution to it that inspires, motivates people to succeed. Many students are not math ready, but we need to focus on why they want to be engineers. There is another stakeholder group that we haven't talked about here, parents and counselors. And it's really important, I think, especially for minority populations, given the experience that we've had, and President Harrison will talk about this later in our remarks, is that it is really important to connect at all levels, at the family level, to ensure that these connections to career and industry manifest themselves in engineers and graduates who move on to success. We need to have guest speakers from industry, connecting with them. Ultimately, it's a hands-on experiences. It's an all-hands-on-deck approach, as the president so eloquently said, that is going to take us to make the connections to career and industry. Those opportunities are there. They'll continue to be there. The phones that we use today was an example that one of the groups used, has so much technology in it, nobody would have believed when the phone was first invented that it was going to take pictures and do all of these wonderful things. And by the way, make a few phone calls, right, along the way. But I'm sure things changed somewhere along the way. And that's the power of innovation. That's the power of invention. And that's a curiosity that I think we need to instill in our students to get them back to connect with STEM. So, thank you.
Thanks, Ramesh. Okay, so now that we've heard a tidbit from each of the facilitators from the sessions, I'd like the audience to start thinking about things that stood out for them that they'd like to point out to the larger group that maybe didn't get mentioned up here. While you're forming your thoughts of making your way to one of the microphones up front, I have one moderator's prerogative question to ask the group, which is based on what you heard someone else say up here in the last half hour, is there a connection between what you guys were talking about and one of the other work groups? Open that up to anybody.
Well, I resonated with what my colleague mentioned here about sometimes the UCs have gone way too far to the other end, and there's no hands-on experience in the laboratory until you reach graduate school. And as dean, I see countless students coming back to get that hands-on laboratory experience to a community college. Unfortunately, our system is not well set up to handle them because typically we're very impacted in STEM classes, and typically enrollment priorities go to the people who are taking their first time through the line. And we have a real opportunity to upgrade and retrain our workforce if we can figure out a way to do these kind of skill upgrades that students would need to have to really be effective in the workplace.
Go ahead, sir.
The one thing that I've heard from your program, and also this morning when we heard about all the different programs that are initiating or in process, and so many of them die. And I think that it's really critical now that we really do start communicating, start identifying best practices, because we can't afford to lose all this investment, and we do really need to find out what's best for data, for if anything, and to identify the scalable programs.
One of the things that I would say that kind of resonated with me was the idea of introducing research early. That is incredibly important. I have to say, when I was running the program at City College of San Francisco, for biotech, 50% of my students that are beyond, so the bridge students go into the main program, 50% of that main program, and sometimes over that, already have a bachelor's in biology. And it's a recent bachelor's. So they graduate out of their school and they come to us for retraining. So we call it a postdoc. That's why it's not transferable. But the other thing, so I want to say, yes, I definitely feel that. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is that once we give these students that early research, they see a reason behind their classes and their ability to stay in the classes, the retention increases dramatically.
Ryan, I'm going to take poetic license with this phrase right here, and I think you've all heard, to err is human, to forgive is divine. And if I were to say to err is human, to engineer is divine, to educate is sublime. Now, the reason I say that is one of the tangible outcomes, as I listen to all of my colleagues right here and what my colleagues in the breakout session shared with me, is that why can't we, across the California State University system, as deans of engineering, deans of education, and deans of science, get together and talk about these collectively? We all talk in our individual groups. Why can't we do that? And the answer is, of course we can. We've done this nationally. Deans of education being experts in pedagogy and deans of engineering working on the content piece. This was done about a decade ago under the auspices of the IEEE. And this is one of the tangible outcomes that came out of our group, which is we can enable these conversations. But it can't just begin and stop at the administrative level. Faculties in education, in science, and engineering need to cross those boundaries and begin talking to each other, because we all care about the same thing. We care about student success in the STEM disciplines. We care about hands-on learning. We care about experiential learning. How do we do it? We collaborate. That's how we do it.
I'm still waiting patiently for someone to approach one of the microphones up front with a question or a comment. Oh, I see we have a volunteer. Thank you very much. Please identify yourself and let's hear your question.
Yeah, hi, I'm Steve Oppenheimer from Cal State Northridge. We start research at the middle and elementary school level. That's when it really turns the kids on to science. By the time you're in college, it's often too late. But we started many decades ago. And we started with Francis Crick, who was the co-chair of our program. And he worked with the teachers, and they were excited. And we also had the teachers in our lab and trained them to do research. Then they went back to their classes and had their kids do research. And we, in fact, have a journal that's published. It's online, and now it's online. You could download it all over the world. It's in the Library of Congress. And this journal has the abstracts of the kids in the classes of these teachers, mostly middle school, who are doing research, and then they come here to Northridge and actually present their posters. And this has been a tremendous success, and the kids are turned on to science, they continue in science, and the administration of Cal State Northridge has cost-shared many, many tens of thousands of dollars. I think we have the most supportive administration in the world. And we also do research at the undergraduate level in large numbers. And of course, nowadays, you know that to get into medical school, to get into pharmacy school, dental school, PhD programs, it's almost required to do research. And we in fact have hundreds of students per year doing research, also tremendously supported by the university. And we have lists of hundreds of success outcomes of these kids who've done research. So as was mentioned, research, in my opinion, is key, and it should start as early as possible.
Thank you, Steve. I think we should give him his own show to talk about that. Terrific. Other questions or comments? I love the passion that's here. It's very evident. All right, you're going to force me to ask another one if you don't come up. Okay, so from my vantage point at a foundation, many foundations want to talk about scale, and they want to talk about sustainability. If we all know what the practices are that are supposed to happen, if you've been in this game for a while, I don't know how much new information you're picking up other than for us, well, how to go about doing it in a big way and getting the adoption going. I was curious if in any of the groups there was some discussion about, you know, not another pilot, but how to think big from the beginning. Edith, did you have a thought about that?
Well, so let's put it this way. Yes, it did come up in my session about scale. We talked about setting up a virtual community. The bridge has actually been adopted by the entire state of Texas. It's also throughout Georgia and other areas, so there is scalability. And through NSF, we actually have a virtual community that allows the instructors to all interact. So with that, it's allowed for these programs to go past the initial grant. The initial grant went away a long time ago. I mean, I have a program that's over 12 years old. So to get it sustainable, you actually need these supportive communities of instructors. Because like our students need supportive communities, we need supportive communities to help us continue.
Ramesh.
Ryan, I would say, again, going back to the continuum word, but I'm going to use it in the context of federal agencies. So you have the National Science Foundation, you have the Department of Education, Department of Defense, Department of Energy. And STEM is a theme that cuts across all of these agencies. We should be able to collaborate across these agencies. I know we're attempting to do that, but there is still an opportunity missed, in my opinion, that we need to build upon. How do we do this? Because it's not just the privates, it's not just the nonprofits. We need to do this collectively together, right, in order to make it work.
Dave?
Yeah, I'll speak from our experience, and I think one of the things that came up in our group was the importance of administrative support. And I think if you're going to, especially with faculty who have this thing, the big T, tenure and all that kind of stuff, if you're going to affect change, you have to be strategic about it. We did a major redesign of our non-majors biology course. Again, this is something we teach 32 sections a semester in this, so 1,000 students. And it all started with one full-time faculty who was game and up for it, and we let her change her delivery, and then we let her bring a few adjuncts on board, and then a few more adjuncts on board, and over a period of time, about 4 or 5 semesters, she's now taken over the world, and the few old school holdouts have migrated to other courses. So
I see.
you have to be strategic about it.
Yeah, sure. Sue, do you have a comment too?
I mean, I don't think we can really sustain anything without changing the culture of research universities. And I think that I'm involved at the National Academy of Sciences. I think we realize this. There's, because like I said, research universities are training science basically to, it's the old, we replace ourselves, right? And 13% are going into academics. Out of all of them. I mean, we have 90% of our students that come in and want to go to medical school, but 10% are going to get in. We have to start connecting with the outside world. We have to stop being limited by the faculty and their connections. We have to make it imperative that the faculty understand that one of the main goals is to train students so that they can have a career. I mean, to have a job and not just stick with content and stick with what we're used to. We have to have a revolution in universities, and that's it. And it's nothing is going to be sustainable until we realize that, everything cannot be focused on research. And research is hugely important, but it has to be filtered to undergraduates, and that's not being done. So, I think that there's going to be a lot of these little things all over the place, but we're running up against tenure and promotion. We're running up against, we don't have enough money for undergraduate education. We're running up against, it's very frustrating. I mean, we're doing a lot in our program, but I think that we really need a revolution. That's all.
Okay.
I'm a child
call
of the
to arms.
60s.
That's good. That's great. It looks like there is a couple of questions, so let's start here. Thanks.
Just a comment based on what you were saying. I think there are solutions to it, and a lot of them were pointed out a couple decades ago by John Goodlad. What we really need is simultaneous renewal in various parts of the system. So until we start working with area schools closely in dedicated partnerships that involve improving teacher preparation, involved working with K-12 teachers on the curriculum, involved with particular named community colleges, in particular named CSUs and UCs in this state, we won't get the job done. But you have to root it in particular clusters of schools to get the job done. In an area like Long Beach or Santa Ana, the districts are small enough so that you can get away without such dedicated planning. But in large districts like LA, in New York and Chicago, I think you really have to approach it cluster by cluster, school by school, and cement these partnerships. And that's how you'll get sustainability. It's very hard to do because we're not used to working across our borders, but I think it can be done.
Great, thank you for that comment. Was there another, do we have one or two? Okay, we got two more questions. Okay, great.
Can I ask two questions? Just kidding.
There's a young lady behind you, so yeah.
My first comment, it's really encouraging to see how research is perceived in undergraduate, and what a wonderful job CSUN is doing and UC Riverside is doing. I think research is not just publishing something, it's opening up the mind of faculty and students and really encouraging them, involving them into the science part of it, and that the whole thinking setup is changed for faculty and students. And talk of encouraging students, I remember in elementary school, I was invited, I used to volunteer for Chemical Society, and I would go and volunteer myself to show them paper chromatography. And I cannot tell you how important it was for that day for them, that they wanted to see something, making a detective story, like there's a red ink left in a car, and then there was this crime committed, how can we prove this is from the pen of this guy? Just a simple paper chromatography. It opens up their mind in thinking process. Then to write it up, to contextualize into math and science, and to contextualize science and reading, I think that all ties up with research. So the way we perceive research is totally not what it is. It is unlimited. It is boundaryless. And we are on a rise. There is no way we cannot progress if we open up a little more research understanding and integrate into our curriculum. My second comment, I feel very enriched. Thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you. And I think we have one last one.
Thank you. I was having a conversation recently with a program officer from the S.D. Bechtel Jr. Foundation about reforming STEM teacher preparation. And I had one of those aha moments, and I'm wondering if there's anything there that might apply to this. We were saying, oh, we had this idea, and this idea, we'll add this, and we'll add this, and it'll make it so much better. And he said, well, okay, those are great ideas, but my board would say, when you reform something, it should actually be less. It should be simpler rather than more. And frankly, I don't know about your campus, but at mine, we rarely make things simpler. So I just wondered if you see any implications for everything we're talking about here.
Interesting question. Anybody want to take a stab at that one? Sue?
I mean, I think one of the big mistakes that are made when people try to create authentic research experiences for the lab, for students, is complexity. And I think what we have to realize is that all the experiments that we do in our program are totally deconstructed from cutting edge things with the idea of what can a student understand, and also what are we trying to teach them? I mean, do we want to teach them, techniques change every 2 or 3 years. We want to teach them what an experiment is. So it's really, that's the simplifying. We want to teach them about, I'm really against this idea of students have to be on publications, because to do a publication, I mean, you spend your whole time doing one figure, and you don't want to do that for a student, especially for a freshman or sophomore. So I think that really simplifying, finding out, let them master the techniques, let them make mistakes. Simpler is definitely better. We've cut our curriculum down like 50% so that students can redo things so they feel good about it, because that's really what you want.
One more.
I have to agree on this one. We send our students out to the internships, which are industry-run, for 180 hours. And one of the things that we make sure of is when the industry is proposing the project that the student will work on, that it is something that is doable, that it's at the student's level, that they will be concentrating on a couple of techniques, and so that they will become a master of those couple of techniques. Now, through basic being in a laboratory, they will learn about the other techniques. Plus, we have a overarching internship support class where all the students who are out on internships will report back what they're doing, what techniques they're learning, and they're teaching the other students in that class about what they are gaining in knowledge that week in their internships. And we found that to be extraordinarily powerful for getting the most out of these internships. And industry has been very much engaged with us by having these out in their area where they're feeding back into us about what they would like to see for preparedness of our students we're sending out. So in this case, you have the interplay that keeps our curricula up to date, and it keeps us sustainable.
Great. I know we're running a little bit behind, and we probably want to transition to the next session at this point, but could I ask the audience to please thank